Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to another episode of Faith Inspired. MashaAllah, we've got a great guest with us today. He's a teacher in a state school. He's got a big passion for education. In fact, he's in a second job or in another state school. He's got a lot of history of education here in the UK. We want to find out more about him. We want to find out how he's inspired by his faith to be a professional and to be a contributor and a confident one too, inshallah. So let's find out who this is. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
Dr. ABDUL HAYEE MURSHAD, welcome. Welcome to Faith Inspired.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We've tried to chase you, and finally we managed, and we're most grateful on behalf of Faith Inspired and Channel S for you to have given us this precious time. So teaching must be a difficult job, and being a head teacher must be even more difficult.
I don't agree it's a difficult job.
Okay.
It's probably one of the best jobs you can do if you like it.
Right.
Any job is difficult if you don't like the job. I happen to like this, so it's probably not as difficult as you think.
Right.
Yeah? So teaching is not my first job. I did probably about 10, 12 jobs before that. Then I came into teaching, and I haven't regretted a single day.
Wow.
And I don't look forward thinking, oh, I have to go to work. Every day is a new day. It's a bright new day.
Wow. And how long have you been in the education/teaching sector?
In education, I've been quite a long time. I would say all my life. In terms of teaching, I've been doing that for about more than 30 years. And I've been a head teacher for about 20 years.
Wow. So what is the total?
Total is about 35, 40 years.
That's almost 60% of your life, would you say?
Well, Allah knows best how long the life is, so you can't.
To date, maybe in terms of where you are from where you started, it's quite a big period of time that you've given and dedicated to education.
Well, it's time to us. I don't calculate time like that. I don't calculate time in years and months. It's a concept, as you know. In terms of our faith, time is what Allah has given us, and Allah knows what time is. We just use it and try to use it to the best of our ability. That's what we are asked to do. And if we can feel that we are doing that, then, you know, how old you are doesn't really matter. But if you're not doing that, then every second counts.
Definitely. Well, every second definitely counts. Even with the interview we have right now, it counts, definitely.
Yeah.
What's interesting is this idea of navigating perhaps some of the times that you require for your faith and the work time, because, you know, an academic timetable can be very beneficial and at times very, very perhaps challenging, or you know, it requires perhaps a different approach. How is that managed by a head teacher?
Again, it's not as difficult as we think it is, because the way I look at it is that you can't really divide your life and say, this is work, this is my life, this is family. Life comes as a whole.
Right. And
you try to do things that you like, you try to do things that make meaning to you. And if you do that, then it's not work. It's a mission.
Wow.
It's part of being life. You know, people often ask me, are you busy? And I say, I will be busy until Allah stops me. In other words, until your last breath, you are busy.
SubhanAllah.
What it is that you may be doing different things, and people see it as different things, but at the end of the day, everything goes to the same pot. So the way I look at it is, sometimes you have to navigate through things, and sometimes Allah makes it easier for you, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult. And when it's difficult, you persevere and you try to make things. Now, fortunately, Allah has made my journey quite simple and easy.
SubhanAllah.
So I haven't had any difficult problems in my career to date. And I've worked for different schools, different organizations, different bodies, both locally and nationally. And I haven't had any major issues. And one of the reasons why I think I haven't had any major issues, because I'm very proud of my faith. You know, I don't see my faith as different, that, you know, I'm a Muslim when I go to the mosque, and I stop being a Muslim when I'm out and about. I try to sort of keep a balance. Doesn't always work, but try to. And I think that helps.
Balance is very important in the life of any successful human being, and definitely in the life of Muslims in particular, and the idea of valuing time. Now, balancing is very, very hard. How have you managed to balance so far?
I think balancing is not overcommitting. You know, sometimes I think we as human beings overcommit ourselves, then get stressed, and that takes us backward. Also, balancing is about prioritizing what is important to me, what I want to do, how much can I do. You know, I always try to think that I don't have much capacity to do things, everything that people would expect. So I don't do things, that's why probably you have to chase me up a little bit,
yes.
You know, that I don't want to do. I do things that I'm capable of. And then the second thing is doing it to the best of your ability. You know, that's also part of my faith, that if I do something, I do to the best of my ability, not half-baked. And I think that's also a lesson that I learned from my parents, especially my father, who was very intolerant to doing things half-heartedly.
Wow.
You know? So he didn't mind what you do, but he always expected his children and everyone around him to do to the best of their ability.
Can you remember a time when your father, who's a very significant figure in your life, just like all of us, that actually taught you based on an incident to say, look, you know, if you're going to do this, then it has to be at the top and in the best way?
He did. I mean, you know, I came to this country when I was very young. Then he inspired me to get into education and go back to Bangladesh. So I left my family here and went back to Bangladesh. But I think that was very much about his views and his values, that he didn't have education and he didn't want any of his children to fail in life because they were uneducated. He also felt that it was very difficult at that time, we're talking about, you know, early 70s, to be educated in this country because of the sheer racism and discrimination that existed in that society. So I went back, you know, and I was educated there, and that was a direct result of his inspiration.
Wow. And how was education for you? I mean, if you compare it now, I mean, this is probably, we're talking maybe 3 decades ago, possibly. So if you were to look back in hindsight, how you know, what was most memorable about education back in Bangladesh as compared to here in the UK?
I think in Bangladesh, education is taken not for granted. People have to work, whereas here, education is taken for granted, you know, all the time.
As in, we have so much of it?
No, not so much. We have to send our children to school. We think if we don't, the law will be behind our back, so we do it. Whereas in Bangladesh, people choose.
So rather than being in a way forced, where people are more inspired and willing and wanting to do so.
And I think things have changed now. You know, recently I went back to Bangladesh, and you can see people are now inspired by education. They see an education a key to success, key to life. And therefore people who cannot afford to educate still beg and borrow to make sure their children get good education. So I think things have improved greatly. But you know, in terms of racism and discrimination, this country has also moved forward.
Yes.
The racism that we had in the 70s, I would like to think has gone backwards. So in terms of everything, you know, I try to do to the best of my ability. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I try to do what I think is a perfect job. And with education, you're not dealing with customer services. You know, you're dealing with customer preparation. We are producing the next generation. And every child is different. Every parent is different. Every family is different. And I have the great opportunity to work with them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So Bangladesh, given that you were born in Bangladesh, what is probably your most memorable time in Bangladesh?
Childhood, growing up.
Right.
I think, you know, childhood in Bangladesh, I still feel, is a much better prospect than what we have in this country. You know, you can jump in the water, you can swim, you can climb the trees. Yeah, you can do.
Or reservoir.
You have a much more freer life.
Yeah.
And a more protected life, more safe life,
Yeah.
more less harmful life, more sort of free and inspired than in this country. Obviously, nowadays, my understanding, I haven't been to Bangladesh and stayed there for long. There are still societies have changed. And there are now new problems that didn't have. But when I grew up, I still remember the golden days of not to be bothered about anything, doing things, and everybody would take care of you. If you did something wrong, people wouldn't hesitate to stop you and say, I know you, don't do this, otherwise I'll tell your parents.
Wow, wow.
Those are the things I fondly remember.
That's also a very big quality, that of having that kind of sense of support around, rather than perhaps using a stick to teach someone. It was almost like there was a sense of your elders are there and they're telling you, look, don't do this,
I was very
don't
fortunate. I had an uncle who never used a stick, but he used his words. So if you didn't pray, you didn't get food.
Wow.
If you didn't get up on time, you wouldn't get the best side of him. But he used that to, prepare not just myself, but all the people around him. And I think in Bangladesh you have those structures. Still the Bangladesh revolves around prayer time. People stop working at prayer time. People go to work at Fajr. People come back when it's Maghrib time. And those sort of things are, engraved in people's lifestyle, which we lack in this country.
Wow. We're going to go to a small break, very interesting. We will come back to some of the things that we could talk about when you say lacking in this country. So we're going to go to a small break and we'll continue with our discussion on Faith Inspired. Welcome back to Faith Inspired, and we've been talking to Dr. ABDUL HAYEE MURSHAD, who's a head teacher at one of the state schools in the UK. So let's continue. Now, having looked at some of those golden moments of early life back in Bangladesh, we talked a little bit about privileges. Now here we have a lot of privileges, but it seems that whilst having plenty, sometimes we are short of some great qualities that we need.
We are. One of the most greatest privileges in my life is that when I was about 16, I had the opportunity to be involved with a group of people who wanted to do something positive. It was like an organized group of people who encouraged people to read, to learn about their faith, to go to the mosque. And in hindsight, I think that probably was a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Wow.
That made, because otherwise you could be anywhere.
Yes, sure.
You could be anywhere. So I think one of the things that we miss at this moment with our own children is those sort of possibilities where children can safely interact with other people who can inspire them. Because sometimes in this country it's very difficult for parents to really inspire the children. However much you say that parents are the best friend of the children, children need space and time. They need peer groups. And I think one of the lacking, from my perspective, is our children don't have that peer group with positive motivation. It exists in parts and pockets, but we don't have any structures or system. And I would like to see every mosque taking that as a responsibility, that our duty is not just to get the prayers sorted. Our duty is to prepare the next generation of the people. And one of the great people you will know is Hazrat Taslim Ali.
Right. The late Haji Taslim Ali.
Yeah, he had this vision when everyone else was running after opening grocery shops.
Wow. Yeah.
That I need a place where I can train people. I had the privilege of going to his mosque when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. And that's a person who truly was faith inspired.
He was.
Right?
He was.
Wow.
He was,
Wow.
and he still continues to be.
His legacy is still living and lingering on in different shapes and
forms.
forms.
I remember after that, I wanted to go back to education.
Wow.
But my family wasn't as looking forward.
Right.
And there was reason, because I'm the oldest in the family, the breadwinner, and suddenly a married person says, I'm going to go into education.
Right.
And your parents are thinking, who's going to look after his wife? Who's going to look after his family? You can't just say,
Allah will look after it without taking means, I suppose.
And I remember the people I was with, two of those people played a great role. They even went and talked to my dad said, you know, if he wants to go back, let him. Because, you know, he could go anyway. And then, you know, they supported me, they supported the family. And I think as a result of that, life was much easier. And we don't have that anymore.
Wow.
You know, people don't come out of their way to help people they don't know. And these two people were not related to me. They were not blood related, or they were not even, I wouldn't say even friends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but they were people who cared for me from a distance.
Yeah.
And they still do.
Isn't that a massive quality of faith, to be able to unconditionally try to care for one another regardless of maybe faith?
Well, that's not a condition, that is faith.
Wow.
Because if you believe in people, and I'd like to think that the children I teach, I don't just do it because I'm going to get a salary at the end of the month. I do it because I think these are our future potential. If I can have an imprint on them, that's time well spent.
So can we ask you how much you get paid then?
Of course, a lot of money. You know, teachers are not underpaid in this country. I mean, if anybody wants to go into teaching, I would encourage them.
Definitely.
It's a great profession. You earn a lot, you live a lot, but most importantly, you leave a mark on a lot of lives. You know, I don't just teach in the mainstream. I'm also involved with another school that operates on Saturday, teaches about 900 boys and girls about Islam. Interestingly, it started because I wanted to educate my own children.
Okay.
And then just spiraled.
Yeah.
But as part of that, we work with 4 mainstream schools. And going back to your faith, I still remember one day we went to one of these schools. It's called Saturday Islamic School. And the head teacher turned around to me and said, Saturday Islamic School, can you not just call it Saturday School?
Yeah.
And I had an inspector with me. And she turned around and said, what's wrong with Islam? What's wrong with calling it Saturday Islamic School? Because that's what it is.
Right.
And the head teacher just dropped dead.
Wow.
Thinking, what do I say now? And I think that's the bit that is missing in some of us.
This is an interesting point. I think you'll be able to give all of us a good opportunity to learn from. You know, here's a situation where I probably would have said, yeah, let's not call it Saturday Islamic School, let's just call it a School of Hope or Saturday School of this or that. And here's someone else from the same sector, from the same profession saying...
Not a Muslim?
Yeah, exactly. So not a Muslim, giving that sense of confidence. Sometimes we assume that that's not available.
I think we do, and I think that is our unfortunate way of thinking. I believe that Islam is not something to be ashamed about. Islam is not something that you need to put in the cupboard. I think if you maintain not being an extremist, so you don't go too much to the right, too much to the left, and if you maintain what Islam requires us to do, to sort of build a world of peace, to work for common good, to educate people so that the world becomes a better place for all human beings, not just for Muslims. I don't think any other human being will stop us. I think one of the reasons why people stop us, because we sometimes become a little bit extremist in our views. I mean, you know, one of the stories that I share, and I share it proudly, before I became a head teacher, when I first started teaching, I went to my head teacher and I said, you know, I'd like to go to the mosque for Friday prayer.
That's an interesting one.
Yes, and she said to me, what am I going to get in return?
Wow.
You're going to get the reward from your Lord, but what do I get? I said, well, if you allow me to go, you get the best of me.
Wow.
You know?
You could have said, I'll bring you biryani every Friday from home.
And I still remember, she turned around and said, well, if I'm alive, you go to mosque. And you know, credit to her, she was the head teacher, but she used to cover me every Friday. And I used to make sure that I don't waste time at prayer. I go to prayer, I come back, no gossiping. Thank her. And if she asked me to do something, do it to the best of my ability. And I remember I did miss a few Friday prayers, but it wasn't because of her. It was because of my laziness but she never let me down.
Well, the thing is, it's very interesting that whole sense of being faith-inspired, that without having to say I'm faith-inspired, it's transcending onto people of other faiths or even no faiths. In this case, has yourself without even perhaps intentionally doing so. It's happening.
It does. I mean, you know, I remember I worked as a HMI, Her Majesty's Inspector, and in the
So you're saying you worked with Ofsted? That's
well,
what you're saying.
it was not just Ofsted. It was more than Ofsted. Ofsted was at that time outsourced.
Okay.
So I worked with the main
Right.
body of people who looked after education. And I remember in one of the meetings, someone, a inspector came towards me, and then suddenly she stopped, and she said, "Oh, you're a Muslim. Can I shake your hands?" And I said, "There's nothing wrong with shaking hands."
Yes.
You know. And she looked at me as though I was strange and said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Look, I'm pretty sure. If I'm not sure, I'll tell you. Maybe a hug will be too much.
Yes.
But you know, shaking your hands is not a problem."
Sure.
And you know, some of us sometimes become really extreme and give the wrong messages. And I'm not suggesting that we leave our religion and become westernized. But I also think that our religion is not an Eastern religion. Our religion is a very up-to-date religion. And we need to keep it up to date rather than keeping it stuck in the past. And that's where the problem comes in, I think.
Sure. And I suppose from that, it also is perhaps to do with our understanding of our faith and how it is able to navigate itself in any time and any space. And sometimes we over-assume that this is what it wants from us. That is what it wants from us.
The problem is, our is not the right word for me. It's me.
Sure.
I don't want to really talk about other people because I don't know about them.
Right.
But I know I have problem. And I think I have problem, I still have problem, and I think that problem will continue until, you know, we go to the grave. And the reason for that is we're not fallible. Yeah? We are fallible creatures, we're immortal, and therefore what happens is that sometimes we often spend too much time thinking about other people. But I'd like to think about myself.
Sure.
And I think in that, I'm not what I need to be. There's a lot of gap. And if I can fill those gaps, then I think I will be more fulfilled.
Sure.
And I think people around me will be more fulfilled. And at the end of the day, as I've said, you know, the concept of time, we've been sitting here. How long have we been here?
We're almost done, nearly.
Yeah?
Nearly.
Some people...
I'm enjoying it, so carry on.
Some people may think that we've been here for a long time.
Yes.
Some people may think it's just gone.
Yes.
So the concept of time is very important to me. And I think Allah has given us a very short life, or a very long life, you know, depending on how you look at it. And we need to utilize this to the best of our ability. And in that, if you can help me, alhamdulillah, that's great. And those two brothers I talked about, they did.
And you're still talking about them?
Yeah.
Subhanallah. Wow.
Yeah, and it's not just two, there's others. I think that's the important thing for me, that if you can leave a bit of touch in other people's lives, I think we call it sadqa zariya. Yeah, it continues and it multiples. I think in me that's lacking at the moment, and if we can get more of that, the better it is. But you know, a lot of people say teaching is hard, teaching is difficult, you know, there's not enough money in it. I would say it's probably the best job you can get under the sun.
Dr. ABDUL HAYEE Murshad, thank you very much for being with us on Faith Inspired. I am certainly inspired. I'm sure our audience are, and we look forward to being inspired through your work and through your life in days and years to come. So thank you once again.
Well, thank you, and Jazakallah khair, and do make prayer for me so that, you know, I can remain inspired.
Inshallah. Dear viewers, what a wonderful opportunity we had to talk to Dr. ABDUL HAYEE Murshad. We will be talking to such wonderful men and women through Faith Inspired. So keep being inspired, and we'll speak to you very soon.